we have the new article, Banzai, this week, going over the conflict, going through a conflict. This article, we didn't really learn a whole lot of new things, but we did learn a couple new things that we can go over. I'm also trying this out instead of, by the way, I'm trying this method out and just showing you instead of doing an entire outline. I figure it's a little bit, at least a little bit more interesting. So the article is fairly straightforward. It has a dragon player versus a phoenix player, and there's it walks us through one conflict example. Well, amongst the number of new things that we learn is that there is an action window going into between the conflicts. I'm assuming that means between each conflict there's an action window where players get to play actions back and forth, which is interesting. It was interesting because we were wondering, well, at least I was wondering, whether or not pacifism, the Phoenix card, which we'll cover here in a little bit, what timing when that would be played. So actions can be played to prevent characters going into conflict and doing those sorts of things, or maybe readying them for another conflict. Uh, but as far as who gets first action in the conflict, which is another new thing that we learned, is that there's no action window once you declare the conflict. There's no action window in between the announcement of the conflict and when the first defender takes first action. So there's no chance, unless it's a forced reaction, I'm assuming, to take an action beforehand. So they have an example in this where the Phoenix player gets attacked by the Dragon player here, and they flip over their province card. So the way it works is you announce your conflict, you announce who's going to attack in your conflict and what ring. And I'm assuming that's all in one step. There's no delineation. It's just this all at once type of thing. Which makes me wonder if they're going to have any triggers off of those when you claim a ring, or I would imagine they would. How how timing works in that instance is a little unknown to me. But so they get attacked and they flip over the province before the action window of the first defending player during the conflict. And the Elemental Fury, the card here that they show us, where is it? There's a card here. All right, so the card here is a province card, and it gives us 4 province strength, and has a reaction after this province is revealed. Switch the contested ring with an unclaimed ring. And so they do that to switch it to from fire, to the fire ring, so they can trigger Isawa Masahiro's ability. But that tells us that like only forced reactions are going to happen before the defender gets first action, which is kind of a big deal actually. Who gets first action in battle has always been a big. I mean, the entire clan, the Mantis clan in the old CCG, had a naval ability which allowed them to go first, and that was a big deal, right? In this, it's unknown whether or not they're actually going to have a sneak attack or a first preemptive action type effect yet. We haven't seen anything like that. I would assume they would add something like that, but it still means that that sort of effect is going to be a big deal, which I like and I don't like. I like it because I liked including those effects. I liked naval. I liked having sneak attack. I don't like it because a sneak attack like effect, if it's in a card form like an event, is going to be like an auto-clued in every single military deck, which is kind of boring, really, to be honest with you. It's there's a lot more interesting things you can do to gain. I really wish they would have tied it to having initiative to a core mechanic or something like that, so you didn't just have to and use that space when you have the first action, do X effect or something like that. I think that would have been a little bit more interesting, but in the end, it's okay. We can deal with it. Defender getting first action is fair. It's okay. It factors in when you're going to attack, which we'll talk about in our strategy segment going into a little bit more. Uh, Going on though, we see a couple of new card types. We see the Honored card. So we get a glimpse into the actual effect that Honored. Now, we were told in the previous articles that Honored and Dishonored status were would gain you or lose you honor. We didn't exactly know, and we know here by the Honored card that when the personality dies, you gain 1 honor, right? And so we actually see the effect that it is a card, but we also do learn that it is a status. There's steps to it, so every character comes out is not considered honored. They actually have to achieve that effect or play an effect and place the honored on the person. Also, if they're dishonored, because during this combat they dishonor them by playing an event card, shame, I believe is the name of the event card here. Some of these new cards are a little unknown to me. Yeah, for shame. So for shame, they play on an honored personality during this conflict, and the honored goes from honored to just normal, like, and presumably that would go from normal to dishonored if there was, or I would also think it would work the other way. So if you're dishonored and you become honored, you just become normal maybe. They don't tell us that for specific, but it's pretty easy to assume. So once the conflict begins, the and any sort of force reactions are played from the provinces are flipped. So you announce your attack, you announce your ring, you attack, the defender flips the province, and then resolves the effect, like in the case of this elemental fury, and then they get the first action, and then from there it goes back and forth, right, until one person passes, and then or until both players pass, and then you count force. Whoever wins wins. Whoever loses loses. Everybody's bowed, and if you won in by enough skill, military political skill, equal to over their 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 army's total combined skill. I'm assuming this word is skill. I'm used to saying force, but the total of the army plus the province. If you win by that much, then you break the province. So, and attackers win ties, which I think we learned in this article too, if I'm not mistaken. Attackers winning ties. Other than that, they show us a bunch of card effects. They show us a new card effect, which had people talking. Cloud the Mind. So, Cloud the Mind is a spell, and in here it's an attachment. It's a 1 fate cost neutral attachment that provides 0 military, 0 political. Has the spell and air traits, and says play only if you control a Shikenja character. Treat attached character as if its printed text box were blank. And there's quite a bit of discussion that was generated because of this card, because this is pretty much word for word minus the Shikenja caveat, or the restriction of being only playable by a Shikenja. Word for word is pretty much Milk of the Poppy and a Game of Thrones card. And they also have similar card effects. Blanking effects are very common in FFG games, apparently. And some people, like, were kind of disheartened. It seems it is a little boring, I'll admit it. You know, of effect, especially to preview. I mean, I would expect, honestly, this sort of effect to be in a box set, and once I start thinking about it, it makes a lot of sense. It prevents power creep. They want a core set to have durability throughout, have playability. They want it to be enduring. They want people to always have to be able to purchase a core set and have value out of it. Depending on what's being played. So they don't want to invalidate it just because they print new powerful cards. This kind of blanking effect helps that, keep that value, right? And if they print a really powerful personality or something like that, well, a core set card can neutralize it, and it still retains its military and political skill. It just blanks it except for traits. So it remains to be seen whether or not that will be as powerful as Milk of the Poppy in my eyes, to be honest. One, it's only playable by Shikenja, which a good fair number of clans should be able to do, at least, especially over time. They'll as time goes on, there'll be more Shikenja printed. But it remains to me like whether or not, because traits like cavalry trait and Bushi, we don't have a whole list of all the traits that they'll print, but if cavalry is going to have effects printed for it, like they've said, like events specifically, then it will still be valid. And this doesn't blink traits. So your guys will still have some usability, whereas in Game of Thrones they really don't, because they're pretty much just consistent of, to my knowledge of Game of Thrones, I'm not a deep meta. I played the game a little bit, but only in casual. So, but to my knowledge, traits aren't used as heavily as in this game, perhaps. So, yeah, it will probably be a 3 of in decks like Phoenix decks, like here, like this would be a 3 of. You can expect it, but and it will also don't depends on how easy it is to get rid of attachments too. So, because this is an attachment. But for the spell card that they previewed, kind of boring. I really wish they would have done a little bit more interesting of a spell, perhaps. They also show us a couple items. So we learn about. The biggest thing we learned here was a lot of the cards, the card types, and little things with the card types. So they show us the Ancestral Datio, which is a 1 fate cost, 2 military skill item, or attachment for that matter, plus 0 political skill. Ancestral, which says when attached, when the attached card leaves play, return this card to your hand. That's also a mechanic that's very from Game of Thrones. Only in that one, attachments I believe automatically go back to your hand, and they actually have to print an effect that says no, it actually goes into the discard pile. Where in this, they go into the discard pile unless they have the Ancestral. So I kind of like that better because it means that there's certain powerful items, or certain items will be more powerful because of the ability to recur them, especially since personalities are coming into play and leaving play. So it retains a little bit more value, especially for 1 fate cost. It's pretty good, and it's also restricted, which we've seen before on the other attachments they've previewed, which is no more than 2 restricted attachments per character. So like your guy can only have 2 swords, or 1 sword and 1 armor, presumably. Anything really restricted. We see a number of things. They play a character from hand in his, although there's kind of a dispute here, or kind of a funny thing, because FFG does this. I went on a rant last week about the Togashi Initiate. But this is with the understanding that, like, in the cards, there was this, at least in my perception, there's an issue. With the preview articles, it's well known. They quite frequently make these little mistakes. I really don't know why. It's just something that always happens. Every single preview article has something, little thing, it seems. And this is kind of a big thing. They show us the character, which is the Seeker of Knowledge. Yeah, Seeker of Knowledge. Which is a 2 fate cost Phoenix character with 0 military, 2 political, Courtier, Shikenja, and Air. While this character is attacking, or 1 glory too. Sorry, I forgot the glory. While this character is attacking, the contested ring gains the air element. Well, element. If the character wins the conflict as an attacker, you may choose which ring effects to resolve. Overall, this is a powerful card. Some people were saying that you resolve both rings. I think that depends highly upon what is in the mechanics, because we haven't seen the actual wording on whether or not you can actually claim 2 rings in one battle. But still, the option to choose between 2, or just add the air, which gives you honor or causes them to lose honor, if I remember right, that's pretty powerful. Like, pretty strong, really. Especially since it's only 2 fate costs. But we also learned when playing a character in hand that you can place faith on them. Now, how much fate? They say 1 fate in the article. That could be a wording issue. This case, because Alex is able to place an additional fate at this time, or to place additional fate on her at this time. So yeah, I would think, yeah, so you can place additional fate. You can pay up to as much, I would assume, by that wording. But makes it interesting playing characters from the hand is a interesting surprise tactic. Obviously, I think we're gonna see ninja. That's how ninja almost all ninja are probably gonna be from the conflict deck as a side like tangent, but it is interesting because it makes the dynasty phase a little less obvious. You're not portraying as much information, right? How many cards you have is still as equally relevant because with one or two fate you can play a guy that can swing a battle. And honestly, I would be interested once we start seeing more conflict cards, what the distribution, if the distribution is different per cost, because this character has a pretty really relevant ability, especially if you're playing an honor deck. And 2 for 2, which is pretty standard. It just makes me wonder if they're going to be cheaper or more expensive, or how that's gonna differ, or if it's gonna differ at all. So yeah, we'll see some more items. They play an event for shame, which I was talking about. Which here it is. Zero fate cost event. Has action during a conflict. If you control a participating courtier character, choose a participating character controlled by your opponent. Your opponent must select one, dishonor the chosen character, or bow it. So that's pretty good, I would say. Participating. So the wording here is also important because this is something that was pointed out to me. So you have for shame here, which I'll bring up again. Shouldn't exit out. So for shame says participating character controlled by your opponent, right? And you have to choose a participating courtier character. And if you look up Masahiro, which we will find right here, which is a 3 fate cost Phoenix Shikenja, or Phoenix character, unique, 3 military skill, 2 political skill, Shikenja fire, he has 2 glory, and the action, during a fire conflict, bow this character, choose a participating character with a printed cost 2 or lower, discard that character. So, during a conflict, bow this character leads me to believe, and it was pointed out that it doesn't disclaim that he has to be in the conflict. He doesn't have to be participating in the conflict, so he could do that from home, or the home state. I think that's what they call it, the home. He's not in battle. He doesn't have to be in the battle, which is interesting because a lot of characters will live and breathe, or live or die in playability because of that. Because whether or not where they will be able to play battles. So if I don't have to commit him to a battle, right? Just have a fire conflict going on. That's really good, especially if we have, especially with like we don't know. It's unlikely that they're going to have any sort of movement, but they're going to have effects that switch rings around. Maybe I would assume that there would probably be some sort of effects that move battles around to different provinces or something, even if it's just the one. Like you can't, it will be different than the old game, because in the old game you had a lot of movement because there was one battle at each province. That's not the case in this. There's one battle that you choose, whether or not that will be switched to a different battle. Those kind of effects are possible within this framework. So, yeah, we mostly saw a lot of cards. We didn't really learn a whole lot of new stuff. We learned about the honor and dishonor thing. We saw our first card that loses honor, I believe. I believe this is the first card. Banzai, it's a 0 cost event. Has action during a conflict. Choose a participating character. Again, the participating have to be in the battle. That character gets 2 military skill until the end of the conflict. You may lose 1 honor to resolve this ability twice, maximum 1 per conflict. That's pretty good. Plus 4 force for 1 honor. That's fair trade. So, but I'm pretty sure that's the first time we've like seen a full bleed, because they had a assassination card which was kind of cut off at half that we didn't see the entire thing. So yeah, and they also said that they're done with the general mechanics previews. So moving into it, I'm pretty sure they might take a week off, but I'm pretty sure they're going to keep up with the weekly schedule when they do resume it. And they had an AMA, like a Facebook live stream AMA type thing, or where people tweeted in questions. I wasn't able to make it, and I haven't really seen it. So anything that they disclosed during that, I don't know. I'm gonna have to look at it. And oh, we also learned that when you break a province, you turn it sideways. You turn it 180 degrees to indicate that it's broken, which is kind of a small thing, but and you discard the option discarding face down. Yeah, so you can discard cards and provinces when you we learned that. Yeah. So overall, not much. It's interesting. It's good to finally start seeing cards. To start reviewing them. We'll go, of course, over all the cards that we saw here when we go over to the respective clans. More than likely, at some point, I'm going to do a review of each clan's card set, whether that's during the clan previews if they have them, or at some other point in time. But yeah, just because I want to see more of the cards in the card pool. So yeah. So moving on to our next topic, or our primary main topic for the evening. 1 second. None of this will be in the audio version, by the way, like the drinks and things.